Hello and welcome along to this week's Liverpool.com podcast. I'm your host, Matt Addison, and Tom Beattie is with me once again. Liverpool didn't win last night against PSV, but they did top the Champions League group. And I think it's safe to start there, Tom. It's obviously, a big achievement really for Liverpool to have come up to the top of that league and finished ahead of Barcelona, who didn't beat Atalanta. But yeah, how do you reflect, first of all, on the Champions League as a whole before we dive into a few individual players?
Yeah, it's been such an impressive showing, and obviously them extra 2 games in the group phase from this season onwards. I think it's obviously difficult for teams to navigate that with sort of the pressures of league form and the domestic cups as well in the respect of the English team. So yeah, I think it's been a difficult one in terms of just kind of juggling that through the season. But yeah, you think back to the teams that Liverpool have been able to beat on this run, going away to the San Siro, for example, AC Milan. And then obviously, that chance with Real Madrid to kind of, get one back on them for sort of recent years. And, the obviously the Leverkusen game as well, that felt like a massive moment in the season for me, coming up against the German champions and getting a result that was sort of that emphatic. And I think that reverberated around Europe, really, didn't it? So, yeah, there have been so many great performances, I think, sort of in that group phase. And I think the players can be really proud of their achievements as a squad. And obviously the first defeat in Europe this season, up against PSV last night. But I thought overall, there were some good performances in there and certainly some positives to take. And obviously when you do look at that sort of league table, to come out on top against some of them names, obviously the leading lights in Europe, I think it is really impressive. And I think as well, to maybe miss out that playoff stage, you look at some of the names in there, Borussia Dortmund, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, AC Milan, PSG, Juve. So yeah, there's some massive names in there that Liverpool have been able to avoid. And I think when it does come around that playoff round, I think that the players and the fans will be relieved that they're not having to play them kind of that tie in and around the league fixtures as well. So yeah, they've done themselves a little bit of a favour in that regard as well. So yeah, I think overall it's been a really good performance in Europe so far this season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, plenty of positives to take. Before we carry on, I should mention as well, don't forget that to get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, you can go to nordvpn.com/bloodred, and our link gives you 4 extra months off the 2-year plan. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee, and all the information for that, as ever, is in the episode description box below. But moving on, Tom, in terms of just the Champions League in general, obviously it's a new format. No one's quite sure. I think it was fair to say that Arne Slot wasn't quite sure even until the press conference before the final match in the group of quite whether it mattered whether Liverpool finished top or second. It didn't, but obviously it's nice to come top. And what have you sort of made of the Champions League format so far? Because the start of all of this, I have to say, I was quite looking forward to it. I think I was probably in the minority, really, in terms of those that thought it would be not the worst thing to change it up. I think, there's one reason why they've done it, really, which is to get a couple of extra teams in and make it slightly easier to maybe get through. If you're, Real Madrid or Manchester City or PSG who've struggled, they've still managed to get through. So I get why people were maybe a little bit reluctant around it. But I think what we have seen is a lot of excitement, a lot of drama. You get to play 8 different teams, which I think is much more interesting than playing the same team twice in the space of a few weeks. What have you made of the Champions League in general so far this season? Have you been as excited by it as I have, or were you one of those who maybe had a few more doubts about the new format?
I think there was certainly a bit of scepticism kind of coming into it, and like you say, kind of the reasons why it was brought in. But yeah, I think overall, it's guaranteed them extra 2 games, obviously. I think there was quite a bit of drama coming in, certainly into them final couple of games where, teams were jostling for position and trying to get in that sort of top 8 bracket. So yeah, I think that's been quite interesting to kind of see that play out. And I think maybe the old kind of group stage, maybe that was slightly kind of tired as a format, and maybe kind of giving it that that sort of rejig in terms of, you know, what it was looking like, and maybe adding those couple more teams into the mix, I think it did add a little bit more jeopardy. And yeah, I think a lot of the top teams, maybe not by design, but in practice, they haven't had it all their own way. So yeah, you look at the likes of Madrid, you know, PSG, Man City, you know, Juve as well. You know, you'd expect them to be amongst the favourites to actually win it this season, but you know, they've not been able to get in that top 8 to secure the automatic kind of way into the last 16. So yeah, it's been interesting to kind of see that play out. And you know, normally with the group phase, I think, you know, maybe the one drawback might be that, you know, we played certain teams that maybe you'd, from sort of a glamour point of view, or sort of, you know, keeping that prestige of the Champions League, we played certain teams that you'd expect to maybe play in them sort of knockout stages. So yeah, Real Madrid and Bayer Leverkusen, for example, even AC Milan. So yeah, there's been a couple of games in there where you think, you know, you would have liked from a supporter's perspective maybe to come up against them in a quarter-final or a semi-final, but kind of looking at how the draw is going to play out last night in terms of, you know, people simulating it on Twitter and that sort of thing, I think there's a good chance that we might come up against Real Madrid in the knockout rounds if we are able to get past the last 16. So yeah, I think maybe either the quarter-final stage or semi-final stage, it looks likely that we'll probably come up against them again. So yeah, I think it was kind of written in the stars a little bit, I think, that we were going to get them at some point, I think, this year. And I think once Liverpool were back in the Champions League, I think they kind of owed them one. So yeah, to be able to sort of get that one in the group phase was a great feeling from a kind of supporter's perspective. But yeah, it's been a bit odd to kind of see it play out, hasn't it? And yeah, I think the jury's still out a little bit in terms of the group phase, but I think it's been a successful first year.
Yeah, it's definitely been a success for Liverpool as well. I think it's going to be pretty important that they've not got the extra couple of fixtures, you know, particularly when you look at Manchester City, you're going to end up playing either Real Madrid or Bayern Munich. That's just a few days before they play Liverpool as well in the Premier League, which is, you know, an extra little layer to add into that particular fixture. I think that is going to be something that teams next season maybe try a little bit more to get through and get into that top 8. Obviously, as we say, it's a little bit trickier to work out exactly how to map your way through, and you'd expect Real Madrid to go a long way. You'd probably expect, you know, Bayern or City, whichever one doesn't get knocked out in terms of those two teams to go a long way as well. So there's still, you know, a lot of things to be decided, and a lot that we can't really work out and map too far ahead. But yeah, it's been a good start certainly for Liverpool in terms of where they're at, and you know, winning the first 7 gave them the opportunity to rotate here as well, so that could be, you know, something important. I think it's fair to say that Liverpool have navigated it better than any other team. How much of a reward do you think it is though to come top when you look at the teams that they could be facing? I think there's a few tricky ones in there. There's an obvious one that you'd quite like to face, I think, on Friday, the draw, isn't it, where Liverpool will find out, you know, which of the two teams it'll be that they play. But, you know, PSG, Benfica, Monaco and Brest, I mean, 3 out of those 4, I think that would be pretty tricky. It's not a massive reward, is it, for finishing top of that group?
Yeah, I mean, they all seem like kind of tricky games, don't they? But I guess that is the beauty of the Champions League, that, you know, you've got to pit your wits up against the best in Europe. And yeah, I think we even saw last night, didn't we? I think Real Madrid went away to Brest, and you know, it was a difficult game for them, and Brest were kind of in the game for most of that. So yeah, there's always kind of tricky fixtures in there, and I think, you know, even Benfica, you know, they've been quite exciting, haven't they? So far this season, you know, there's been a couple of games in there that, you know, I've enjoyed watching so far this season. Obviously, the Barcelona one sticks out. But yeah, I think they got a result away at Juve as well, didn't they? To book the place. So yeah, there's a couple in there, obviously, that I think will be tricky. I think you mentioned Monaco as well. So yeah, we've come up against them in Europe down the years as well. I think that the Champions League run in 2005, we come up against them, didn't we? So it's been a while since we played them. But yeah, I think it is the beauty of the Champions League, obviously, that you come up against these teams and, I think the manager will kind of be seeing that as a bit of an opportunity, I think, to sort of, pit his wits against, some of the upcoming managers in Europe as well. So, yeah, I think possibly it's not the hardest straw, in terms of, if you were to come up against any of them names. But, yeah, I think they all kind of pose their own threat, really, don't they, to Liverpool? And they'll have to be on the game when that tide does come around. But, yeah, I think Liverpool should be looking at it, I think, in terms of trying to get to the latter stages now of this Champions League. And, like I say, just before, when people simulate it, I think there's a couple of teams, maybe, semi-final stage, Real Madrid, for example, that might be in the offing for Liverpool. And I think Liverpool are going to have to be ready to kind of, juggle that with the league season. So, hopefully that healthy lead in the Premier League that they've been able to build up so far, and also, that one kind of fixture less or two fixtures less in the Champions League, missing out that playoff round, I think that might be a massive advantage as well. So yeah, we'll have to kind of see how it plays out.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be interesting, isn't it? I think particularly in the first year with the new format, we're not quite sure exactly how it's going to work and how it's going to look, and when there's going to be draws and how many draws and how much it matters and all of that kind of thing. But the main thing is that Liverpool have got themselves through, and yeah, fingers crossed they don't end up playing PSG in the next round. I think that would be particularly cruel, having come top of the group phase. But we'll see what happens. But let's dive into a couple of individual performances from the game against PSV. Obviously, Liverpool lost that match, but I think there was still quite a few positives. I want to start with Federico Chiesa. He was the standout, I think, in terms of probably those that you were looking to make a bit of an impression. Obviously, Cody Gakpo and Harvey Elliott played well as well. But I thought Federico Chiesa was particularly interesting, just, I suppose, from a very basic point of view. He played 90 minutes, which is the first time he's done that in about 8 or 9 months. I think he's been injured for a long time, has taken his time to come back. But I think it was really promising that he was still sprinting around and trying to press all the way through the game right up until second half stoppage time. What did you make of Chiesa's performance, and how much of a big step forward do you think that is for him?
Yeah, I think he showed signs in the past month at sort of the game time he's been able to get on the board, that he is getting up to speed. And, it seemed like one of them performances last night that you might be able to build upon. And there seems to be a lot of buy-in from him, which is really good to see. The goal from the penalty, he wins the penalty, doesn't he? And that pressing from the front, that's kind of what Slot will be wanting to see from his wingers. And yeah, to be able to kind of create that opportunity, I felt was really promising. And he's starting to show that sort of form that we saw down the years, obviously at the Euros, Euro 2020, and sort of, the kind of form that got on the move to Juventus originally. So yeah, I think that, he's starting to show kind of his qualities, and, it's great to see. I felt last night he was, harrying the opposition defenders and really kind of setting that press out on the wing, like I say. And yeah, I thought he was a threat throughout, really. There was a couple of opportunities that he had that he kind of fashioned for himself. And, we've seen that a couple of times, I think, in recent weeks, which is good to see. I think the last time I seen him, he was out on the left wing and, was cutting inside and creating opportunities for himself in that respect as well. So I think he showed a little bit of kind of flexibility as well, which I think will be great for the manager. But yeah, just kind of the chance as well to be able to rest Mo Salah, which is a bit of a rarity for the manager. I think that'll kind of, benefit Liverpool, kind of, coming moving forward. And yeah, obviously we've got games coming thick and fast in the league as well. That kind of never stops for Liverpool, does it? I think it's Bournemouth away next. So yeah, it's one of them where, to be able to give sort of your top players that night off, not having to travel over to Holland, I think that was a massive advantage for Liverpool. And yeah, I think he played really well on the night, which is good to see. And I think he is going to be a massive option for Klopp in the second half of this season. He seems to be getting better and better every single week. So yeah, I'm quietly kind of confident that he's going to make a little bit of an impact, I think, in the remainder of the campaign, which, sort of first half of the season, there was that worry there with his injuries, whether he was ever going to get going. There's been a couple of players down the years where they've come in and, maybe, injuries have not kind of gone their way. The likes of Arthur Melo, for example, he'd not been able to kind of break in. But, Chiesa's kind of showing that every week now, if he's coming off from the bench, or even this PSV game where he got 90 minutes under his belt, he has got that quality to affect games, and it is a rarity at the end of the day. And if you've got a player there, you can kind of deputise for Mo Salah and come in certain games and give him that rest. I think that's a massive advantage for the manager.
Yeah, he seems to love being at Liverpool as well. There was some quotes from him last night. I think he was speaking to LFC TV after the game, and he kind of just said, he loves being at Liverpool. He doesn't want to go anywhere. There's been a few transfer links with moves back to Italy and stuff, which I think is inevitable when a player comes in and doesn't play a huge amount. But I agree with you. I think he could make a bit of an impact in the second half of the season if you've got a player with that kind of quality to come on with 20 minutes left, whether that's to try and change a game, whether that's to give Mo Salah 20 minutes off when Liverpool have got a result already confirmed before the end of the match. I think it is going to be an important rotation option, and I think they are going to have to be patient with him. He's probably going to have to be patient as well, because it's not that long ago that we were talking about him as an 80, £100 million player. He's clearly not that, and he's not going to be in the team every week ahead of Mohamed Salah. But if he's happy to be patient and rotate in and out, then I think he can definitely make an impact before the end of this season. But as Arne Slot said at the start of the season as well, when he wasn't really playing and he was struggling to get those minutes, it's not just about this season. I think he signed a 4-year contract at Liverpool. He's going to be here for the next few years, even if he gets to the end of the season, then has a full pre-season and goes again. I think there is potential there if he can stay injury-free for that to be a real bargain move for Liverpool, really. But the other player I wanted to pick out in terms of an individual was James McConnell, because I think he was an excellent performer in the middle of the pitch. I really liked the bit where he turned into Ryan Gravenberch for a bit and spun past a couple of players on that half turn. I just thought he was so impressive. I've seen quite a lot of him at youth level, and he's always been very comfortable and confident with the ball. He's someone who's not been afraid to throw a tackle in as well at certain times. But to play that well and be that composed on your Champions League debut, to come in and not really look out of place. I mean, that was just so impressive from James McConnell, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was amazing to see, and I think that's a really good comparison with Gravenberch. That run in the first half that you mentioned, that was really impressive, and I thought that kind of caught the eye on the night. And it's been interesting in recent weeks that we've mentioned about maybe lacking them legs when Szoboszlai isn't in the team, and I thought he really brought them last night, and that was really promising to see. And yeah, hopefully second half of the season we might be able to use him as a bit of an option. He looks like he's got a lot of energy. He's able to turn the ball over quite well. Get Liverpool on them transitions into attack, and yeah, I felt that was really good to see. And maybe it's a bit of a trump card for the manager in the second half of the season. We've mentioned about Chiesa, but he's another kind of fringe player that I think we can kind of get minutes out of. I think maybe even in the coming weeks. Obviously, we've got the cup games. The EFL Cup semi-final with Tottenham, and then the Plymouth Argyle game as well before the Merseyside derby. So there's a couple of, I think, occasions there where maybe you can get a run out again. But yeah, I felt last night, obviously, we can see the players who came off the bench last night, obviously Nalo, Morton and Trainioni. It was kind of difficult for them to get into the game, I felt at times, and we saw with Jaden Dans at times, it is difficult at that level, isn't it? Sort of back to goal, and maybe that lack of experience sometimes away from home in Europe. It is a tricky kind of role to fulfil in terms of that centre forward position for him. So yeah, I think that kind of made McConnell's performance even more impressive. He didn't look out of place at all. And I think it is good to see these young players being able to come in, and obviously Liverpool lost the game on the night, but I think there were periods in the game where Liverpool did dominate, and he was a big kind of factor in that, I felt, and sort of his legs and his running off the ball was really impressive. So yeah, again, he's a player who I think second half of the season I'm really looking forward to seeing a bit more of.
Yeah, I think he can definitely, come in and similar to sort of Chiesa coming in for 20 minutes for Mohamed Salah. Maybe James McConnell can do 20 minutes here and there for Ryan Gravenberch and things like that. I think, he's shown himself to be of a level where you wouldn't be too concerned if he was thrown on. I think he will make the bench a few more times in the next few weeks, because Arne Slot said actually afterwards that he's been thinking about maybe sending him out on loan, but that performance maybe has changed his mind. I think he was sort of half joking in terms of that, but it wouldn't shock you if he did keep him around just to see what happens. And I think it was interesting as well that he started him ahead of Tyler Morton, who drew a lot of interest from around Europe. I'm a big fan of Tyler Morton, but I think James McConnell's performance there was more than enough evidence really to say that Arne Slot was right to go with him rather than Morton from the start. I think he certainly justified that in terms of his performance and played really well. So yeah, hopefully we can see a little bit more of him. I'm sure he will, as you say, play against Plymouth, but possibly one or two other matches as well moving forward. So that's definitely one to watch out for. Just a couple of other players to touch upon as well in terms of the PSV game. Obviously, Harvey Elliott, I mentioned briefly before, he scores. A little bit unlucky, really, not to have the goal just before the penalty was given as well. If the referee had waited a couple of seconds, then he would have got himself on the score sheet a little bit earlier. But I suppose he falls into a similar category, really, doesn't he? He's one that has the quality and has the talent, but maybe just needs a few more opportunities. How impressed were you with his performance, and how likely do you think it is that Harvey Elliott finds his way into the team a little bit more often in the next few weeks?
Yeah, I felt he was a bit of a bright spark again for Liverpool in that final third, and I think that is what he gives you. He's always got an eye for a pass, and he's got an eye for a goal as well, and we obviously saw that in the Lille game, and again in the PSV game. You mentioned about the one before the penalty, if the game was allowed to play on it would have been in the back of the net, and he would have got another goal on the night. But yeah, I thought he was really impressive. He is a little bit different in terms of an option, I think, for the manager. The fact he can kind of play in that number 10 position. You can even see a role for him, I think, on either flank, maybe. Just in terms of him being able to press and that sort of thing. Obviously, he hasn't got kind of blistering pace, but I think he's got a lot of ability just in terms of being able to kind of break open the defence. So yeah, I think we kind of saw a little bit of that last night. I thought it was a tricky game, and they looked really well coached, didn't they? I felt at times they were happy to kind of sit back, and then there were points in the game where PSV were able to dominate, and it was a bit of a funny game to assess. I think they were going almost long ball, weren't they, at stages in the game. So it's kind of hard to kind of get involved in games that are like that. But I felt when he was on the ball, he was kind of able to affect things. And yeah, he's another player. Obviously, second half of the season, you'll be hoping things go a little bit better for him. Everything was kind of injury struck, wasn't it? First half of the season for him, he got really unlucky in that regard, kind of early on in Slot's reign, and we haven't kind of been able to see really, how it's going to play out for him in the Slot team. But I think we're kind of seeing the makings of that now a little bit in recent weeks. He feels like a player who's really banging on the door in terms of wanting to start games, and I think his performances have been really strong in recent times, and it's given the manager a bit of a decision to make, I think. And again, in kind of the weeks to come, we've got a couple of cup games there. I think Bournemouth away will be a tricky test for Liverpool, given how well they're doing. And then obviously the Merseyside derby, brings up its own kind of challenges for Liverpool, doesn't it? But I think there are a couple of games in there where he's really going to be useful. And I often say about him, he was one of the most used players, weren't he, under Jurgen Klopp, albeit off the bench, a lot last season. But he can affect the game, I think, and maybe that's the sort of quality that you need coming off the bench. He's another player who I don't think's really let Liverpool down in the time he's been here. He's always been impressive, and he looks beyond his years on the pitch. He already looks like an experienced player at times. I think he did last night as well, which is really good to see. So yeah, he's a player I think that Liverpool have got to get full usage out of, I think, in the second half of the season, because I think he's a massive asset to the squad.
Yeah, absolutely. Even if he's coming off the bench here and there, I think he can be, a big asset. And I would put Jaden Dans into that category as well. I mentioned a possible loan for James McConnell, or whether Arne Slot might have changed his mind on him. It was obviously an illness to Darwin Núñez that meant that Jaden Dans got his opportunity. I think it's fair to say Núñez would have started ahead of him had he not been sick. But it's interesting with Jaden Dans, I think, as well, really, in terms of what happens next with him. He's clearly got quality. He's shown that, plenty of times when he's played at Anfield. I thought he did pretty well. He took quite a few hits in terms of being fouled or certainly, tackled when the referee didn't necessarily agree that it was a foul, even though it quite clearly was. There was a few heavy hits that he took, but it was obviously a steep learning curve for him as well. But what do you reckon the best pathway is for Jaden Dans for the rest of this season? Is it a loan before Monday's deadline, or would you like to see him stick around and maybe just get one or two opportunities for Liverpool before the end of this season?
Yeah, I think recent weeks have kind of showed that he might actually get minutes at Liverpool, whether it's, because of injury. Diogo Jota's not been able to keep fit consistently so far this season, and obviously Darwin Núñez was ill last night. So, yeah, in recent weeks he's been able to get minutes on the pitch, hasn't he? And, I think it's an interesting one. Obviously, at the start of the season, there was that speculation over maybe a move to Plymouth on loan. And I think in an ideal world, maybe going out and getting minutes might actually be kind of the best option for him. But yeah, kind of looking at how things are squaring off for Liverpool now. So, they're in both domestic cups still. They obviously got the Champions League on the back burner now for a little bit, but that's going to come back around. So I think he is going to get chances. He is going to get minutes. He's obviously still young. I think what I really like about him is he always seems to be involved in the play, and he's not a player who goes missing in games. I think often with younger players, you have sympathy for it, but maybe they go a little bit missing in games, and they're not kind of showing for the ball, and they're kind of doing the simple things. And like you say, even last night, obviously he didn't get on the score sheet, but he was winning fouls, and he was a little bit unlucky at times, maybe not getting a little bit more protection in that regard from the referee last night. But yeah, I felt overall, it was a promising performance from him, and it kind of built upon what he did last year, and also in the Accrington game, I felt he put in a really good show in there. So yeah, you're hoping the cup games coming up, he might get a run out. But yeah, there is a tricky one to assess because Liverpool have got options in that position. You would expect, obviously, Darwin Núñez to be in there ahead of him, and obviously Diogo Jota when he's fit, and Luis Diaz has been used in that position as well so far this season, hasn't he? But yeah, I think it's a bit of a tricky one. Obviously, we're in the latter stages of the January window now, so if a move was to happen, it'd have to happen quickly. But I can kind of see him sticking around, I think, and maybe being a little bit of an option, maybe off the bench or even in them kind of cup games to come for the manager, I think, in the remainder of the season.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a really tricky one to know what to do. It's a balance of, probably 4 or 5 games maybe for Liverpool before the end of the season, or, if you can get that loan right and send him to the right place, then possibly there might be a benefit of him maybe going to a top-end championship team and, going there. Obviously, you mentioned Plymouth. I think that maybe wouldn't be the right move if he's kind of battling at the bottom and, the difficulties that come with that. But yeah, I think there's definitely a decision to be made there. I think it's a little bit 50-50, I think, with me. I think you can make the argument either way, but I'm sure we will find out in the next couple of days whether that will happen or not. And whichever way it is, I think you'd back Jaden Dans to knuckle down and try and get as many goals and things, even if that's at under 21 level for the rest of this season. I think there's definitely a talent in there. But yeah, I think that will just about do us for this week. It wasn't a Liverpool win, but they did still come top of the Champions League group. And as Tom mentioned earlier, the game against Bournemouth at the weekend is a big one. Very much looking forward to that. I think it should be goal-filled and very interesting. I'm sure we will touch upon that on next week's podcast. For this week, though, that is it from myself, Matt Addison, and Tom Beattie as well. Thank you very much for watching and for listening, and we'll catch you at the same time next week.